All right, let's go back to Iraq. Now, Iraq is something that we see on the news all the time now. People in our country know about it a lot, and maybe you even know people who are serving over there. Um, Iraq, like I said, at one point in history was the most advanced, best civilization on earth. And in the 1970s or so, this guy named Saddam Hussein took over. There's a lot of conflicts between Iran and Iraq. And the United States got involved. There have been a lot of conflicts. He ruled with an iron fist. He scared everybody with guns and fear and force, and he kind of kept his country together. And they were becoming one of the wealthier oil countries in the world. But there are three big divisions of people, like we talked about earlier this section. The Kurdish people, and then we also have the Shiites and the Sunnis, both living in Iraq, not getting along. But somehow Saddam Hussein was able to keep them together, well, because he scared them to death. Now, in the 1990s, Kuwait was accused by Saddam Hussein of drilling oil from one of their underground reserves. So he invaded Kuwait, and the United States and this whole coalition of people decided to attack Saddam Hussein and ask him to get out. And you know what? That war, we call it Desert Storm, was really quick. It was a really, really quick war. And then that gave us suspicions that he had biological weapons because he used them up in the north against the Kurdish people later on. And so the United Nations put some sanctions on Iraq, and they were supposed to let us in there to check to see if they had biological weapons and weapons of mass destruction. And in the 2000s, they were not as open to that. They weren't letting us do as many. So a lot of Americans started getting suspicious that Saddam Hussein was up to something with these weapons. And then after 9/11, President Bush decided, there was evidence saying that he was giving checks, that Saddam Hussein was giving checks to some of the people from Al Qaeda. So they kind of linked it, and we went in. Actually found Saddam Hussein, put him on trial for war crimes against the Kurds, and he was hanged in the 2000s. Now our soldiers are there. Their leader's gone, and a lot of Americans think, boom, we should be out of there. We're done. But we're not. Our soldiers are still there trying to help them set up a government and trying to help them keep peace. But again, we have three different groups of people who don't get along trying to maintain a government. Their oil areas, oil fields are always a big concern, and their different minorities of religion and ethnicity are a big issue here too. Now, everybody's trying to modernize. Yeah, there's people in Iraq who have iPods and are listening to music just like you and on the internet, and they have really nice buildings and all of that. But war is interrupting this process. It's pretty hard to keep building nice new shopping malls when they get blown up, which has happened a lot, or war is happening everywhere you go. They just kind of get used to it and try to move on anyway, but it's certainly not modernization like we're used to. So I want to take you to this website and talk about another issue from the Iraq War. And this is the Iraqi marshlands. Now, Saddam Hussein, to get back at the Shiite people for Desert Storm, because they kind of sided with the Americans, he drained their large wetland. Now, this is an area, I can show you here, that a lot of people thought was the Garden of Eden. It was an amazing place, and they drained it. Let's look at these images. Back in 1973, the wetlands looked like this area. Okay, right? Between the two rivers, this is the wetland area. And by the year 2000, it had all dried up and only shrank to this little area. Now, this is a wetland. A lot of you are hunters and fishermen and naturalists and outdoors people. He cut off the streams going into it, dammed up those rivers, and it dried up. Now, this is land that people fished in, lived, all the animals, the vegetation, everything in this area was gone because he wanted to get back at the people who lived there because they sided with the United States during the Desert Storm conflict. And so when we went back in the 2000s, Americans were, or a lot of soldiers and civil engineers and everybody wanted to fix it. And so they started restoring these wetlands. And it is pretty amazing. I mean, there's tons of homeless people because of this and everything, but right now they are working to fix it and rehydrate it, and it's called the Marsh Miracle. So I will put this link to this article on the website, and you can look at it and search for other pictures of the marsh in Iraq. It's pretty interesting because a lot of people think that this was the Garden of Eden, and Saddam Hussein had it drained to hurt a certain group of people. Alright, well, I hope that helps you understand a little bit more. Again, this stuff is really simplified, really short. We'll dig into it a lot more in world history class, and you're always encouraged to go online and read more, ask questions, come. I've got some great books and resources on this too. Thanks.